If anyone had asked me what success looked like, I never would have talked about money. I would have talked about my son. His name was Ryan, and from the day he was born, every decision I made somehow revolved around giving him a better future than the one I had been given. I never owned a big house. I never drove a fancy car. Most of my life was spent fixing broken boilers, repairing leaking pipes, changing light fixtures, and making sure office buildings stayed warm in the winter and cool in the summer. My hands were always rough, my boots were always dirty, and my back reminded me every morning that I wasn't 20 anymore. But none of that ever bothered me. Every blister on my hands meant another bill paid. Every overtime shift meant another opportunity for my son. After my wife, Emily, passed away from cancer when Ryan was only 9 years old, life became very simple. There was no room for dreams that belonged to me anymore. There was only Ryan. I learned how to braid hair for school plays before realizing boys didn't need braided hair. I burned more dinners than I could count before finally learning how to cook something besides scrambled eggs. I attended every parent-teacher conference, every basketball game, every science fair, and every graduation ceremony. Sometimes I worked 16-hour shifts before sitting in uncomfortable gym bleachers just to watch Ryan play for 12 minutes. He never knew I was exhausted. I never wanted him to know. Children should remember their parents smiling, not struggling. Ryan was smart. Much smarter than I had ever been. While I barely finished high school before going straight to work, Ryan earned scholarships, won academic competitions, and talked about business and economics using words I couldn't even pronounce. Every report card felt like another reminder that he was going somewhere I never could. And I loved that. Whenever people complimented him, I'd smile like they were talking about my greatest accomplishment. Because they were. When Ryan received an acceptance letter from one of the best business schools in the country, he ran into the kitchen holding the envelope above his head. "Dad!" I looked up from repairing the kitchen sink. "What happened?" I got in. For a second I just stared at him. Then I wrapped him in the biggest hug I'd ever given anyone. "I'm so proud of you." "We did it," he whispered. "No," I corrected gently. "You did it." He shook his head. "I couldn't have without you." Those words stayed with me for years. Whenever work became difficult, I'd remember them. Whenever another unexpected bill arrived, I'd remember them. Whenever my body begged me to slow down, I'd remember them. Because every sacrifice had a purpose. College wasn't cheap. Even with scholarships, there were books, rent, meals, transportation, and dozens of expenses no one warns you about. So I picked up more shifts. Weekends disappeared. Vacations became memories from another lifetime. The guys at work joked that I practically lived in the maintenance room. Maybe they were right. But every extra hour meant Ryan didn't have to worry about dropping out because of money. If I had to choose between a new pair of work boots or sending him another check, the boots could wait. They always waited. 4 years later, Ryan graduated with honors. I still remember sitting near the back of the auditorium wearing my only suit. It was nearly 15 years old, a little tight around the shoulders, and shiny at the elbows from too much use. I noticed other parents wearing expensive watches and tailored jackets. For a moment I wondered if I looked out of place. Then Ryan walked across the stage. Nothing else mattered. After the ceremony, he searched through hundreds of people until he found me. "There you are." He hugged me in front of everyone. "This is all because of you." I laughed. "Don't start giving me credit for your hard work. You gave me the chance." That was enough for me. The years that followed moved quickly. Ryan landed a job with a major consulting firm in Chicago. His salary in his first year was more than I had earned in nearly 3. He rented a beautiful apartment overlooking the river. He wore tailored suits. He traveled for business. Sometimes he'd call and tell me about meetings in New York, conferences in Seattle, or clients overseas. Half the time I didn't understand what he actually did. But I understood one thing. He was happy. Every time someone at work asked how my son was doing, I pulled out my phone. I've got pictures. Then one Thursday afternoon, while I was replacing ceiling lights at an office building, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. Dad? Everything okay? Actually, I wanted to invite you to Chicago next weekend. I smiled immediately. What for? I got promoted. My eyes filled with tears before he even finished the sentence. Ryan. I'll be giving a presentation Monday morning, and the company is hosting a celebration dinner Sunday night. I'd really like you to come. For a second I couldn't speak. I wouldn't miss it. After hanging up, I stood there holding my phone with the biggest smile on my face. One of my coworkers noticed. What happened? My son got promoted. That's wonderful. He wants me there. The whole crew congratulated me. Even my supervisor shook my hand. You earned this too, Mike. I didn't think so. But hearing it still felt nice. The rest of the week, I could barely concentrate. I bought a new tie. Not an expensive one. Just a navy blue tie that looked respectable. I polished my old dress shoes until they almost looked new. I even got a haircut from the barber I'd been visiting for 20 years. You got a wedding? He asked. I smiled. Better. My son invited me to celebrate his promotion. The barber grinned. Now that's something to be proud of. Sunday finally arrived. The train ride into the city felt longer than usual, mostly because I couldn't stop imagining Ryan introducing me to his coworkers. Maybe I'd embarrass him by talking too much. Maybe I'd tell stories from when he was little. Then I laughed to myself. He'd probably roll his eyes just like he always did. And we'd both laugh. When I arrived at his apartment building, Ryan greeted me with a quick hug. You made it. I told you I would. He looked successful. Confident. Professional. Exactly the man I'd always hoped he'd become. We spent the afternoon catching up before he glanced at his watch. I should get ready. No problem. While he adjusted his tie in the mirror, I straightened mine. What time do we leave? He stopped moving. For several long seconds, he stared at his reflection without saying anything. Finally, he turned toward me. His smile had disappeared. Dad. There was something uneasy in his voice that I'd never heard before. I've been thinking. I waited. About tonight. He rubbed the back of his neck. I don't really know how to say this. A strange feeling settled in my chest. What is it? He avoided my eyes. My boss, and some of the executives are going to be there. That's nice. He nodded slowly. They're a certain kind of people. I frowned, unsure what he meant. Then he took a deep breath and quietly said the words that neither of us would ever forget. I think it's better if you don't come. I blinked. What? He swallowed hard. I don't want anything awkward. I stared at him in complete confusion. Dad. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You'd be embarrassing. For the first time since the day I buried my wife, I felt my heart break without making a sound. I didn't say anything for several seconds. Not because I didn't have anything to say. Because I had too much. The words were there, sitting in my throat, waiting to come out. After everything? After all the years I spent working extra shifts so he could chase his dreams? After all the nights I sat alone at the kitchen table paying bills and wondering if I was doing enough? After all the times I told myself that my sacrifices didn't matter because my son was building a better life? Now he was telling me that I was the one thing he needed to hide. But I didn't yell. I didn't ask him how he could say something like that. I didn't remind him of every sacrifice I had made. Because the truth was, at that moment, I wasn't angry. I was hurt. There is a difference. Anger burns quickly. Pain stays. I looked at Ryan standing there in his expensive suit, staring at the floor like he was ashamed of something. And for a moment, I wondered if he was ashamed of me. Or if he was ashamed that he felt ashamed of me. I understand, I finally said. His eyes lifted. You do? I forced a small smile. You're busy. You have an important career. You have people you need to impress. Dad. It's okay. But it wasn't. And I think we both knew that. He looked relieved, and somehow that hurt even more. Because part of me had hoped he would stop me. I hoped he would say, "No, Dad. I didn't mean that. You're coming with me." I hoped he would remember who I was. Not the old man in worn-out work clothes. Not the maintenance worker. Not someone who didn't belong in his world. I hoped he would remember the father who stayed awake during every fever. The father who worked holidays so he could have better opportunities. The father who sat in the front row even when his uniform still smelled like work. But he didn't say any of those things. He simply nodded. Thank you for understanding. That sentence followed me for a long time. Thank you for understanding. As if I was supposed to understand being hidden. As if love meant accepting whatever pain your child caused because you loved them too much to fight back. That evening, Ryan went to the company dinner alone. I stayed in his apartment. The same apartment I had once entered with pride, thinking about how far my son had come. Now I sat on his couch in silence, looking around at the expensive furniture, the city lights outside the window, and the life he had built. A life I had helped create. But somehow, there was no place for me in it. I picked up an old photograph from a shelf. It was taken years ago. Ryan was 16. He was standing next to me at a baseball game. We were both smiling. Back then, he didn't care that my hands were rough. He didn't care that my clothes came from discount stores. He didn't care what anyone thought. He was just happy that his father was there. I wondered when that changed. When did success become something that made him embarrassed of the person who helped him achieve it? Around midnight, I heard the apartment door open. Ryan walked in quietly. For a moment, he didn't know I was awake. He looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. He loosened his tie and noticed me sitting there. You should be asleep. I looked at the clock. Couldn't. He nodded. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. How was the dinner? Good. Did your boss enjoy it? Yeah. I nodded. That's good. He sat across from me. Dad. I looked up. I didn't mean to hurt you. There it was. The first sign that he knew. But sometimes an apology that comes after the damage has already been done feels different. I know. I just wanted tonight to go well. I know. You don't understand how competitive this world is. I almost smiled. Because he was right. I didn't understand his world. But I understood people. And I understood that people who truly respected you didn't make you feel ashamed of where you came from. I know you worked hard to get where you are. His voice softened. I did. And I'm proud of you. Thank you. But Ryan. I paused. Never be so successful that you forget who helped you get there. He looked away. I won't. But I wasn't sure if he believed it. And maybe neither of us did. The next morning, I packed my bag. Ryan offered to drive me to the train station. The entire ride was quiet. Usually, we would talk about everything. Sports. Work. Family. Life. This time, we stared through opposite windows. Before I got out of the car, he said something. Dad? Yeah? I'm sorry. I looked at him. A part of me wanted to tell him that everything was okay. That's what parents do. We protect our children from feeling guilty. But this time, I couldn't. Because if I made it easy for him, he might never understand how much those words hurt. So I simply said, "I know you are." Then I closed the door. The train ride home felt different. When I left, I was the proud father of a successful son. When I returned, I was a man wondering if my son still saw me as his father. Or just a reminder of the life he was trying to leave behind. Over the next few weeks, our conversations changed. Ryan still called. But not like before. The long conversations became short check-ins. "How are you?" "Good." "How's work?" "Fine." "Okay, Dad. I'll talk to you later." Every call ended with the same uncomfortable feeling. Like we were both pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. One Saturday morning, I was fixing a broken fence outside my house when my neighbor asked me a question. "Mike, didn't you go visit your son recently?" I nodded. "Yeah. How is he doing?" I smiled automatically. "He's doing great." My neighbor studied my face. "You don't sound happy." I looked down at my hands. The same hands that had built furniture, repaired homes, and held my son's hand when he was learning to walk. "I'm proud of him." That's not what I asked. I didn't answer. Because the truth was complicated. I could be proud of the man Ryan had become. And still be hurt by the way he treated me. Those two things could exist at the same time. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Michael Anderson?" "Yes." "This is Daniel Carter." The name meant nothing to me. "I'm sorry, who?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I believe we met briefly recently." "We did?" "Not officially." I frowned. "I don't understand." His voice became more serious. "I'm calling because I need to speak with you about something involving your son." My heart immediately tightened. "Ryan?" "Yes." "What happened?" Another pause. Then he said something I never expected. "Mr. Anderson, I think you need to know what your son did." I sat there silently, holding the phone. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like something was about to change. I just didn't know whether it would bring my family back together. Or tear it apart forever. The voice on the phone belonged to Daniel Carter, but I still didn't understand why a man I had never met wanted to talk to me about my son. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry, but I think there may be some misunderstanding." "I don't believe there is." His confidence made me pause. "Do you know my son personally?" "Yes." "From work?" "Yes." I looked out the window at the quiet street outside my house. "Is Ryan in trouble?" There was a brief silence. "No. Actually, it's the opposite." That answer confused me even more. "Then why are you calling me?" Daniel took a breath. "Because I met someone recently who reminded me of something important." "Someone?" "You." I laughed softly. "I'm not sure I understand." "You helped me last week." I thought back. The previous weekend, after leaving Ryan's apartment, I had spent a few extra days in the city because I didn't want to immediately go home feeling defeated. I had walked through downtown, visited old places, and tried to clear my mind. On my way back from a small coffee shop, I had seen an older man struggling near the entrance of a building. He had dropped several folders and papers across the sidewalk. People walked past him. Some looked. Nobody stopped. I didn't think twice. I walked over and helped him pick everything up. "Are you okay?" The man smiled. "I'm fine. Just getting slower with age." I laughed. "Tell me about it." We spent a few minutes talking. I didn't know his name. I didn't know he was important. I didn't know he was someone who could change my son's entire future. To me, he was just a person who needed help. You were kind to me when you had no reason to be, Daniel said. I was just helping someone. Exactly. There was something about the way he said it that made me listen. I've spent my entire career surrounded by successful people, he continued. People with impressive titles, expensive clothes, and perfect resumes. But sometimes the most valuable qualities can't be listed on paper. I smiled slightly. You're making me sound more important than I am. No, Mr. Anderson. I'm reminding you that you are more important than you believe. Those words stayed with me. But I still didn't understand what this had to do with Ryan. Then Daniel finally explained. My full name is Daniel Carter. I'm the CEO of Carter Global. I froze. I knew the company. Everyone did. It was one of the biggest consulting firms in the country. And Ryan worked there. My heart sank. You know Ryan? Yes. How? He works for me. The room became silent. I didn't know what to say. The man I had unknowingly helped on the street was my son's boss. The same boss Ryan had been afraid would meet me. I didn't know who you were, I said. I know. And you didn't tell me? Would it have changed the way you treated me? No. That's why I didn't tell you. I sat quietly. Because he was right. If I had known his position, maybe I would have acted differently. Maybe I would have chosen my words more carefully. Maybe I would have worried about how I looked. But because I didn't know, I was simply myself. And apparently, that was what mattered. I need to tell you something else, Daniel said. What? Your son never mentioned you. The words hurt more than I expected. I tried not to show it. What do you mean? I mean, when we discussed his background, his family, his journey. He paused. He never talked about the person who helped him get there. I looked down. I wasn't surprised. But hearing it from someone else made it real. Maybe he just wanted to focus on his career. Perhaps. Daniel's voice became softer. But I find it difficult to believe that someone who sacrificed so much should be treated like something to hide. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing to say. A few days later, Daniel invited me to lunch. I almost refused. Not because I didn't want to go. Because I wasn't used to being invited into rooms like that. But something inside me told me to accept. When I arrived at the restaurant, Daniel was already there. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Not about money. Not about business. About life. He asked about my wife. About Ryan growing up. About the sacrifices I made. For the first time in a long time, someone listened without rushing me. You know what surprises me? Daniel said. What? Your definition of success. I smiled. I never considered myself successful. Why? Because I never built a company. I never became wealthy. I never had a fancy title. Daniel shook his head. That's exactly why I think you understand success better than most people. I looked at him. Success isn't what you collect, he said. It's what you give. Those words stayed with me. But while I was having conversations with Daniel, Ryan had no idea. He continued living his life, believing the situation with his father would eventually disappear. He thought time would make the pain smaller. He thought silence would solve the problem. But silence doesn't erase hurt. It only hides it. A week later, Daniel and I crossed paths again at a company event. This time, he invited me as his guest. I hesitated. I don't want to interfere. You won't. I'm not part of your world. Daniel smiled. Maybe that's the problem. What do you mean? Sometimes people become so focused on entering certain worlds that they forget to appreciate the people who helped build their foundation. I didn't know what would happen at that event. I didn't know Ryan would be there. I didn't know the truth was about to come out. But Daniel knew something I didn't. He knew that eventually, everyone has to face the difference between the image they create and the person they truly are. And soon, my son was going to face that moment. The night of the company leadership event arrived, and I almost changed my mind about going. I stood in front of my closet for several minutes, looking at the few suits I owned. One was too old. One didn't fit quite right anymore. The newest one was the navy suit I had bought years ago for Ryan's college graduation. I ran my hand over the jacket and smiled sadly. That suit had seen some of the proudest moments of my life. I never imagined I would wear it for a moment that would reveal how far my relationship with my son had fallen. Still, I decided to go. Not because I wanted to prove anything. Not because I wanted Ryan to feel embarrassed. I went because Daniel had shown me something important. My worth wasn't determined by whether my son was proud to stand beside me. I knew who I was. I knew what I had done. And I knew the kind of man I had always tried to be. When I arrived at the event, I immediately noticed how different the environment was from anything I was used to. Everyone wore expensive clothes. Everyone spoke with confidence. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. For a brief moment, I felt that old feeling return. The feeling Ryan had described without saying the words. That I didn't belong there. Then I remembered something Daniel had told me. Never confuse a different environment with a lower value. Those words helped me straighten my shoulders. A few minutes later, Daniel walked onto the stage. The entire room became quiet. People listened carefully as he spoke about leadership, success, and the importance of character. Then he said something unexpected. Before we continue tonight, I want to recognize someone who reminded me what true success looks like. I looked around. I assumed he was talking about an employee. Someone who had achieved something remarkable. Then Daniel looked directly at me. Mr. Michael Anderson, could you please come up here? For a second, I thought I had misunderstood. Me? I looked around nervously. Daniel smiled. Yes, you. Slowly, I stood. As I walked toward the stage, I noticed something. Ryan was there. Standing near the front. And the expression on his face changed the moment he saw me. Shock. Confusion. Fear. He had no idea I was coming. When I reached the stage, Daniel shook my hand. Everyone here knows me as the CEO of this company. But tonight, I want to introduce you to someone who reminded me of a lesson I should never forget. The room became silent. Last week, I had an unfortunate accident outside my building. I dropped important documents, and dozens of people walked past me. One person stopped. One person helped. One person treated me like a human being, not a title. I looked down. I didn't feel like I had done anything special. I later discovered that this man was the father of one of our employees. The room shifted. People started looking around. Then Daniel said the words that changed everything. Michael Anderson is Ryan Anderson's father. A wave of whispers moved through the room. I looked toward Ryan. He looked like someone who had just been forced to face a truth he had been avoiding. Daniel continued. I asked Michael about his life. He told me about working long hours. He told me about raising his son after losing his wife. He told me about sacrifice. But do you know what he never did? Everyone listened. He never once complained. He never once asked for recognition. He never once took credit for his son's success. Daniel paused. That is character. The room was completely quiet. I could see Ryan struggling to keep his emotions hidden. Daniel turned toward him. "Ryan, your father told me something that surprised me." Ryan looked up. "He said your success was your own. He said you earned everything you have. He was proud of you." Ryan lowered his eyes. Daniel's voice became more serious. "But what surprised me was discovering that someone who gave so much to help you succeed was someone you were afraid to introduce." The room went silent again. Ryan's face turned red. Not from anger. From shame. I could see him remembering that night. The words. The way he looked away. The way he made me feel like I was something he needed to hide. Daniel looked at everyone. People often think success means moving away from where you came from. But real success means honoring the people who helped you get there. The applause started slowly. Then it grew louder. People stood. Not because I was wealthy. Not because I had a powerful position. But because they understood something simple. A person's value is not measured by their job title. It's measured by their actions. After the event ended, I stepped outside for some fresh air. I needed a moment alone. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. "Dad." I didn't turn around immediately. I already knew who it was. Ryan stood beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I didn't know you knew Daniel." I didn't either. He looked confused. Then he laughed quietly. A sad laugh. "Of course." "What?" "Of course something like this would happen." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He wiped his eyes. "The one person I was embarrassed by ended up being the person everyone respected." I didn't say anything. Because I didn't want him to feel humiliated. That wasn't what I wanted. I never wanted revenge. I never wanted him to suffer. I only wanted him to understand. "I was wrong, Dad." His voice cracked. I was so wrong. I looked at him. And for the first time in a long time, I saw my son again. Not the successful executive. Not the man worried about appearances. Just Ryan. The little boy who used to hold my hand while crossing the street. The little boy who once believed his father could do anything. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. I took a deep breath. "Neither do I." He looked surprised. "But we can try." Tears filled his eyes. "After everything I said?" "Yes." "Why?" I smiled sadly. "Because I'm your father." That was the moment Ryan finally understood something. The person he thought would judge him was the person who still loved him the most. But forgiveness would not erase what happened. And rebuilding what had been broken would take more than one apology. It would take time. It would take humility. And most importantly, it would take Ryan proving that he had finally learned what mattered. The weeks after the company event were different. Not because everything suddenly became perfect. Real life doesn't work that way. A single apology, no matter how sincere, cannot erase months of hurt. It cannot erase the moment someone you love makes you feel like you are not good enough to stand beside them. It cannot erase the questions that keep you awake at night. But an honest apology can be the first step toward healing. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something different in Ryan. Not success. Not ambition. Humility. Before that night, Ryan was always focused on moving forward. The next promotion. The next achievement. The next person he needed to impress. But now he started looking backward. At the people who had been there before anyone knew his name. Especially me. A few days after the event, Ryan came to my house. Not for a holiday. Not because he needed something. Not because there was an emergency. He simply came to see me. When I opened the door, he stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. For a second, I almost laughed. He had always hated coffee. You remembered? He smiled slightly. I remembered you liked it. That small gesture meant more than he probably realized. We sat on the porch where I had spent countless evenings after work. The same place where I used to sit and wonder if I was doing enough as a father. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan finally said, I've been thinking about what happened. I nodded. I figured you had. I keep replaying that night. He looked down at his hands. The way I talked to you. The way I made you feel. I hate that I did that. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care. Because I wanted him to understand. I think I was so afraid of people judging me, he continued. I forgot the one person whose opinion should have mattered most. I looked at him. Mine? He nodded. Yes. I cared more about what strangers thought than what you felt. His voice became softer. And that's something I'll regret forever. For years, I had imagined what I would say if Ryan ever apologized. I thought I would explain every sacrifice. Every difficult moment. Every time I chose him over myself. But sitting there, looking at my son, I realized something. He already knew. Sometimes people don't need a list of your sacrifices. They need time to understand them. I never needed you to become rich, I told him. I never needed you to impress anyone. I just wanted you to remember where you came from. He nodded. I forgot. The honesty in those words mattered. Because excuses would have pushed us further apart. But taking responsibility created a path back. Over the next several months, Ryan made changes. Not dramatic changes for attention. Real changes. He started visiting more often. He called just to talk. Not because he needed advice. Not because he wanted something. Just because he wanted to hear my voice. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we sat in silence. And surprisingly, the silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt familiar. Like it used to. One Sunday afternoon, Ryan helped me repair the old fence in my backyard. The same fence I had been fixing alone for years. He struggled at first. I laughed. You know, a screwdriver isn't a computer mouse. He smiled. I know. Do you? No. We both laughed. And for a moment, everything felt normal again. Just a father and son spending time together. Not a successful executive and the man who raised him. Just family. A few months later, Ryan invited me to another company event. This time, he didn't hesitate. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't look around to see who was watching. He simply introduced me. This is my father, Michael. And the pride in his voice was something I will never forget. Not because other people heard it. Because I knew he meant it. After the event, one of his co-workers approached me. Mr. Anderson, I just wanted to say something. I smiled. Of course. He talks about you a lot now. I raised my eyebrows. He does? The co-worker nodded. He says you taught him more about leadership than any business class ever could. I looked across the room at Ryan. He was talking with his colleagues. Confident. Successful. But different. Better. Because now he understood something that many people never learn. The people who support you before you become successful are often the people who matter most after you get there. Years later, when I think back to that painful night, I don't remember the embarrassment. I don't remember the rejection. I remember what came after. I remember that sometimes people lose their way. Sometimes pride becomes louder than gratitude. Sometimes success creates distance between people who once stood together. But I also learned something important. Love doesn't mean pretending someone didn't hurt you. Love means giving them the chance to become better. Ryan didn't fix our relationship with one grand gesture. He fixed it through small choices. Showing up. Calling more. Listening. Respecting. Those little moments rebuilt what one painful moment had damaged. And maybe that was the greatest lesson of all. A person's worth is never measured by their clothes, their job, their income, or the room they can enter. The true measure of a person is how they treat the people who stood beside them before the world knew their name. I spent my entire life trying to give my son a better future. In the end, he gave me something I never expected. A reminder that even after a heart is broken, it can still heal. And sometimes, the greatest success in life isn't reaching the top. It's remembering the hands that helped you climb there.